As a boxing fan, some of the images I like to see the most post-fight, after the violence of the sport has passed, an outcome has been determined, a victor has been decided, some of the images I like to see most post-fight are images like this. That regardless of what took place inside of the ring, both combatants, both participants, both athletes and gladiators are alive and well afterwards to pat each other on the back, embrace each other in sportsmanship and good humor, goodwill, and move on to whatever the next chapter of their lives is going to be. That they have that luxury to plan their next move. As a boxing fan, these are the images I like to see the most after a fight as a boxing fan. And as a boxing fan, when we hear that one of the participants, one of the athletes, the gladiators, has so decided to retire, to put that chapter of their lives to an end, to bring it to a close, in many ways it is cause for celebration. I remember when Andre Ward retired from the sport. I remember that there were those out there who were levying criticism towards him because they felt that he should have stuck around a little longer, that he's a young guy. Why is he deciding to retire? My sentiments towards his retirement were very simple. He knows his body and what it is still capable of more than we do. So if that is the message that his body and his spirit is communicating to him, then he should adhere to that message. Because this sport is a dangerous sport. Oh yeah, we enjoy watching it from the comfort of our living rooms and the comfort of our own homes. But for the guys that actually step between those ropes in that squared circle, the danger is very real. And the mortality of it, every so often, rears its ugly head at everyone in this spectator sport. That the spectators, the same ones that are in the stands cheering as two guys battle it out, the spectators, they have to take the good with the bad. That in this sport, your life can change and your life can end. And here on the heels of the news that Maxim Dadashev, who was in action this past Friday on the undercard for Teofimo Lopez's fight with Masayoshi Nakatani, on the heels of that news, that this young fighter with so much aspiration, so much ambition, a family man who is survived by a wife and a child, on the heels of the news that this fighter, this gladiator, has lost his battle, has lost his life due to injuries that he sustained in the ring, I think that the entire world of boxing right now is feeling a genuine sense of loss because this happened before our very eyes, you understand. The injuries that costed this man his life were being broadcast for all of us to see. This is a fighter who sustained injuries so life-threatening, had to induce a coma, that they eventually costed him his life, and this happened right in front of everybody. Earlier, a couple of weeks ago, we lost Sweet Pea, one of the greats in the sport of boxing. A true bona fide legend. Anybody who saw him in action, came up in his heyday, will know that name and what kind of a fighter he was. But when we lost Sweet Pea, Sweet Pea had already left the sport. He was hit by a car, and that took his life. That didn't happen in the ring. That didn't happen while the cameras were rolling, you understand? So the situation is a little different, and this does give us a lot to reflect upon as boxing fans. I'm sure the boxing world in general is feeling a sense of loss right now because this is very heart-wrenching that this man, all of this happened right before our very eyes. If only something could have been done sooner. And these are just my thoughts on it, It happened the way that it happened. It's an occupational hazard. It's the risk that every fighter takes when he climbs between those ropes. I can't imagine how Buddy McGirt might be feeling right now, but, from what I saw, he did what he could.
Stop the fight. Max, I'm going to stop it. Max, you're getting hit too much. You're getting hit too much, Max. Please, Max, please, let me do this, okay? Okay? Look at me. Please. Please, you're getting hit too much, Max. If I don't, they're going to do it. You understand me? If I don't, the referee's going to do it. Please. Please, Max. Come on, Max, please. Come on, you got to be honest with me, man. Doc, actually stop it, Doc. That's it.
How hard was it to convince Max that it was time to stop?
I couldn't convince him, and I'm saying to myself, is this worth it? God forbid, one punch, as you know, could change a whole guy's life, and I wasn't going to let that happen. So I'd rather them be mad at me for a day or two than to be mad at me for the rest of their life.
He did what he could. He recognized the danger. He saw the condition of his fighter, the aesthetic of the fight, and he recognized that it's time to get my guy out of here. There's just nothing for him in here. I feel like he did what he could, and I just can't imagine Aegis Climax and his worries, which he was wearing on his face as the camera panned over to him after Maxim had already left the arena. You know, he was being shipped off to the hospital. You could see the worry on the guy's face. You could see the worry. And I think what people are going to take from this is those who are aware of this story, those who were keeping up with this, because I was keeping up with this story, I just didn't get the chance to talk about it in light of so many things that were happening this weekend. I think that what people are going to take from this is a bit more consideration for the referees who might stop a fight a little early, for the fighters who may so decide themselves that they've had enough, or for their trainers who make that decision for them because they can see that their guys had enough. I think that anybody who reflects upon the life and death of Maxim Dadashev may have a bit more consideration moving forward. I think back to many of the harsh criticisms that were levied towards Anthony Joshua post Andy Ruiz. This is a guy who picked himself up off the floor 4 times. 4 times after being knocked down 4 times. And after the fight, many people were calling him a quitter. I didn't agree with that sentiment myself. I didn't view the guy as a quitter when, a quitter's not going to pick himself up off the floor 4 times. So if the fight ended the way that it did, it's not because this guy quit, it's because he was in no condition to go on. That's what I saw, that's how I saw it. But that didn't stop a lot of people from saying the things that they said, harsh criticisms, things like that. That didn't stop a lot of people from being very inconsiderate for the threat level that any fighter experiences inside of the ring. I think about, those things that Deontay Wilder said ahead of the Dominic Breazeale fight. He says, he was saying he wants to catch a body in the ring. That's not the only time that he ever said that. We talked about it here on the channel, and how no matter what, there are going to be people that hear that and don't like it, because those people realize it's a genuine possibility. It could happen. You could hit a guy so hard, the wrong punch might get through, and that guy might not go on to do anything after that. Fuck boxing, the guy might not fucking make it off the hospital bed after that. There were a lot of people whose feathers were genuinely ruffled by those comments. And those sentiments ring true here today, that is no laughing matter. You want to hype up a fight, you can fucking do that. But you go threatening people's lives in that way, and it's not going to be funny anymore. It's not entertainment. Because in this sport, it is a genuine possibility. The life and death of Maxim Dadashev reminds us of that. It will serve as a cautionary tale in the annals of boxing history that this sport and the threat level associated with it, the danger, it's very real. And while his death is fresh on our minds, while the news is hot off the presses, we may be all feeling a sense of loss. But in the months, years to come, I think that anyone who actually saw that fight and subsequently saw the news that broke just days after, I think that they will have a level of consideration towards the actual sport itself more so than some others, because, there's a genuine feeling of loss right now, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere, Rest in peace, Maxim Dadashev. Condolences to his family. God bless the dead. Your battle is over. A moment of silence for Maxim Dadashev. Moving on. In other news, Dan Rafael reports, per sources, that Canelo Alvarez is reaching a deal with Sergey Derevyanchenko, the same Sergey Derevyanchenko who is supposed to be the mandatory challenger to what is still Canelo Alvarez's IBF title. The report states that what was a scheduled purse bid that was supposed to be going down on Tuesday at noon has been postponed until Friday due to Golden Boy Promotions entering advanced talks with Lou DiBella, Sergey Derevyanchenko's promoter, to schedule a fight that could take place in the 4th quarter. And this move is a real plot twist, because it seemed like all but a foregone conclusion that Canelo Alvarez was going to vacate the remaining titles he holds in the middleweight division. And the reason that it seemed like a foregone conclusion is because most of the talk coming from the Canelo Alvarez side of things seemed to have suggested that he was planning a move upstairs, a move for either a Callum Smith fight or a Sergey Kovalev fight. I mean, those were the reports. Those were the conversations. In all honesty, it went from people expecting Canelo Alvarez to challenge Demetrius Andrade for what was then the last remaining title for him to collect, the WBO title, the title that would have made him the undisputed middleweight champion. The conversation went from Canelo trying to be the undisputed middleweight champion to Canelo potentially going up for either Callum Smith or Sergey Kovalev. Yet now it seems the conversation and its focus has shifted back to the middleweight division, and it appears that Canelo Alvarez is trying to hold on to what middleweight titles he's still in possession of. These are just my thoughts. If we're seeing that Canelo Alvarez is reshifting his focus back to having a fight in the middleweight division, I think that the only reason we're seeing that is because it's a byproduct of Canelo not getting the fight that he actually wanted. Oh, Canelo Alvarez has no shortage of options. He really doesn't. In the middleweight division, the super middleweight division, and the light heavyweight division. So long as Canelo Alvarez wants to fight a particular guy, odds are that that guy is going to be receptive to a Canelo fight, regardless of where that guy campaigns. Anybody from Sergey Kovalev to Dmitry Bivol to Callum Smith to all those guys at middleweight, they all want a Canelo fight. So Canelo has several options, but the only one of those options that he actually seemed interested in was a Kovalev fight.
Oh, really?
Why do I say that? Because Sergey Kovalev's the only one of those guys that actually got an offer from Canelo. I mean, in all honesty, Canelo said that he wants to go for undisputed, but Andrade never got an offer from that guy.
I don't know, did he?
Jamal Charlo was his mandatory challenger, but that went nowhere fast. He went from his mandatory challenger to the champion because Canelo, he's the franchise French fry, whatever he is now, but that's what he is. And you know, that Charlo fight didn't go fucking nowhere. A Golovkin rubber match. Canelo Alvarez doesn't seem too interested in that either, and they expressed as much. That, you know, Golovkin, he better go out there and get a belt or something because they're just not interested in that guy. Callum Smith, a potential opponent option, but an option that Canelo Alvarez didn't send an offer to, whereas Sergey, he did get an offer. Out of all these different guys, he's the only one that got an offer. And even though Sergey and his people looked at the offer as a lowball offer, better still, they actually got it. They're the only ones that really got an offer. So that seems to be the only guy that he had a genuine interest in fighting. But we know that Sergey's hands, they are tied. He's got a mandatory challenger that he's got to get past. So that Canelo fight, it can't be, you know, it can't happen. Not right now. If that fight is to take place, it has to be at a later date because Sergey's busy anyway. So that forces Canelo to seek out what other options are out there for him. And he's looking at his mandatory challenger, Sergey Derevyanchenko, via the IBF. But if he's looking at that guy, I reiterate, it's because he couldn't get the fight that he really wanted. So let's say that the talks between Canelo's people and Sergey's people prove to be fruitful and a fight between them actually gets made. That fight would thereby have a ripple effect on the entire weight class because, you know, I reiterate, it seemed almost like a foregone conclusion that Canelo was going to leave the middleweight division. But if he's not, if he's going to defend his title against this guy, well, that is going to change things a bit. You see, Sergey Derevyanchenko went on to say that he'd take a Canelo fight, and if he can't get Canelo, he's open to fighting Gennady Golovkin for what would be the vacant IBF title. And he also said that he would be open to unifying that title if he won it against Jamal Charlo. But if it just so happens that Sergey does get that Canelo fight, well, you can forget about all that other shit.
So if Canelo beats him,
all that other shit might not happen because Sergey might fight Canelo and Canelo might beat him, and there goes whatever plan Sergey had with the red belt. Funnily enough, even if Canelo Alvarez does fight Sergey Derevyanchenko, you know that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to stay in the middleweight division afterwards, right? I recall what happened when Canelo Alvarez vacated the green belt, briefly dropped down to junior middleweight and fought for the WBO title. You know, he fought for the title, he won the title, and then he threw that in the air and went back upstairs 2 weight classes or something like that. So I think about that and I see this situation and I think to myself that, you know, just because Canelo defends his red belt while he's still holding it, just because he defends it against Sergey doesn't mean that the plan has changed. He may still be looking to move up there and fight Sergey Kovalev or at minimum Callum Smith. He doesn't seem too interested in what the middleweight division has to offer. I mean, at minimum, that's how it reads. That he doesn't care about an Andre fight, he doesn't care about a Charlo fight, and he done been there and done that with Gennady Golovkin. So Gennady Golovkin, he needs to make it interesting, get a belt, bring something to the table, because we've already fought, not once, but twice. That's how it reads. Canelo no longer seems interested in what the middleweight division has to offer. So if he's fighting Sergey, I don't take that as a sign that Canelo's going to stay at 160. I don't. I take that as a sign that, okay, he's keeping busy. He needs a keep busy opponent, so he will keep busy with his mandatory challenger. But after that, it's an open book. Who knows what Canelo Alvarez, might decide to do? This is a guy with more options than he knows what to do with. Anyone from 154 to 175 would be open to a Canelo fight. I guarantee it. If Canelo Alvarez even sneezes in any one of these guys' directions, they're open to a Canelo fight. Anybody from 154 to 175. Anybody from Sergey to Dimitri Bivol to Callum Smith to Zerto Ramirez to just about anybody in the middleweight division and anybody moving up from junior middleweight into the middleweight division. So Canelo's got no shortage of people to choose from. And that in and of itself makes it very hard to forecast what his next move will be. He might fight Sergey Derevyanchenko at 160, then move up and fight Sergey Kovalev at 175. Who really knows? Canelo Alvarez is a guy with so many options, you just don't know what he's going to do next. So we'll see what develops with this, but at minimum what I will say is that this does read as a byproduct of Canelo not being able to get the fight that he really wanted. That's how it reads. Thinking ahead to the not so far away future, if Canelo Alvarez ends up fighting Sergey Derevyanchenko, you know what the conversation is going to become. You know what the talks are going to turn into. Canelo Alvarez's critics, who just so happen to be Jermall Charlo's fans, they're going to say that Canelo's ducking Jermall. That is what they're going to say. They're going to look at that situation and they're going to say that, so you're okay fighting your mandatory via the red belt, but this guy over here was your mandatory via the green belt, and he was your mandatory longer than that guy. That guy just became your mandatory because you just won the red belt, whereas the green belt, you already had that, and you didn't seem interested in fighting Jermall. That is what those people are going to say because they're convinced that Jermall is someone that Canelo should be afraid of. No matter how bad he looks in a fight, no matter how bad, no matter how ordinary, no matter how basic, they're convinced that Canelo, who is the more proven fighter at the weight, is avoiding Jermall Charlo. And I maintain my original position. I don't see anything in Jermall that Canelo has to be worried about. I don't see anything that he needs to be afraid of. I really don't. And when I see this situation, I don't see a situation to where a fighter is looking to circumvent danger so much as Charlo is not important to Canelo. Canelo does not view him as an adequate use of his time. I understand that Jermall wants to fight. I understand that. Why wouldn't he? That's what fighters aspire to do. They aspire to be in big situations. So I don't blame him for wanting the fight. And as far as his fans, I don't blame them for wanting to see him match his talents against Canelo. I don't blame them for that. But accusing Canelo Alvarez of ducking him, well, that's quite another matter because Canelo has fought more proven fighters than Jermall. So jumping to a conclusion like that, it's a bit far-fetched. But, I reiterate, I think that's what the conversation is going to become if Canelo ends up fighting Sergey where people were waiting for him to fight Jermall.